Thank you. Again, welcome everyone to NSLI Interactive's final virtual event of 2022, celebrating the holidays with NSLI, a holiday special, if you will. My name is Kyle, and I work for the NSLI team at Iron USA. My colleague Alexander will be helping out with this event as well. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Before we start with the presentation, we'll quickly go over some of the functions in Zoom, as well as an outline of the event. Feel free to rename yourselves so only your first name appears, as Alexander and I have earlier, and make sure that you are muted while the presenters or a fellow attendee is speaking. This event will begin with a brief introduction of the NSLI program. Then each of our 7 student panelists will briefly share about their on-program holiday experiences. I'll ask a few questions of our panelists, after which time we'll open up the floor for a Q&A session to the audience. So while our presenters are presenting, please think of any questions you may want to ask when it is time to do so. You can then ask the questions either in the chat box of the Zoom feature or its Q&A feature. For those who cannot join us live or need to leave early, we are recording this webinar and will post it on our NSLI Interactive website after captioning is completed. Attendees may have audio and video later, but currently they do not. You should all be muted at the moment. The National Language Security Initiative for Youth, otherwise known as NSLI, is funded by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Every year, NSLI brings around 600 students overseas to study a critical language such as Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Indonesian, Korean, Persian, Russian, and Turkish for either a summer or an academic year. Students on NSLI programs immerse themselves in the local culture, engage in citizen diplomacy, and work to become experts in their language. Throughout their time abroad, students often find opportunities to celebrate holidays in their host locations and form deep connections to their host culture as a result. Tonight, you'll hear from alumni panelists across a wide variety of NSLI summer and academic year programs about the holidays they've celebrated and the connections they made to their host cultures. If you're eager to learn more, you can at nsliforyouth.org. And you can also learn more about the NSLI student experience from students themselves on nsliinteractive.org. Tonight's panelists are joining us from across the country and around the world to share their holiday experiences. First up, we'll hear from Ainaz, Italia, Liam, and Rowan, who celebrated Eid al-Adha this past summer in Indonesia and Morocco with NSLI. Then we'll hear from Othman, Poppy, and Takita about some of the holidays they celebrated while on NSLI academic year programs in Morocco, South Korea, and Taiwan. So first up, we'll have our group of summer alums. Students, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, so my name is Liam, and Ainaz, Italia, and Rohan and I all celebrated Eid al-Adha. So next slide, please. And Eid al-Adha is the largest Islamic holiday, and it commemorates the Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son Ismail in obedience to God, and God provides him with a ram to sacrifice instead. So to commemorate this event, Muslims perform ritual animal sacrifice, and 1/3 of the meat is given to the poor, 1/3 to relatives and friends, and 1/3 is eaten by the family. And culturally, Eid al-Adha was a fun time to celebrate with friends and family. And you can move to the next slide, please.
So for my breakfast, I participated in the Indonesian program in summer 20 Bam, which is basically like a chicken soup with an egg in it. It was really good. It reminded me of like the warm feeling of home. It was really great.
And in my picture, you can see there's msimin, which is a very typical Moroccan bread. It's like a laminated bread that's often eaten with breakfast, as well as dates and mint tea, which is eaten with like almost every meal in Morocco. And this is the first of many slides that we have about food. And I think that goes to show that food is not just important for celebrating holidays abroad, but it's also like a really integral part of the NSLI-Y program, because food is one of like the greatest platforms for like intercultural exchange. And so for future NSLI-Y participants, I would just encourage you to use food as a medium to like share your own culture with your host family, as well as to learn from your host community about their traditions regarding food. So next slide, please.
Hi, my name is Inez and I was on the Rabat program. And personally, when I was celebrating Eid and spending time with my host family, I didn't really come in contact with the Eid prayer, which can really just show how like everyone has a different experience with their host family and just general spending time on the program.
And then my neighborhood had a community prayer in a field outside, and everyone wore jalebas and kaftans, which are traditional Moroccan outfits. And we actually went to the souk a few days before with my host parents to buy new jalebas for the special occasion. And so, yeah.
So the morning prayer for my family started at 7 in the morning. I was able to participate with my family, and I sort of sat in the back with my host sisters. So my host sisters were on the young side, so I was hanging out with them, and my host mother was participating. She also let me borrow one of her dresses that was really nice. It was blue and
Hi everyone. I'm Rowan. I was in Rabat, Morocco as well. And my experience with the Eid prayer. So very early in the morning, my host family got up and they attended the mosque for the prayer. They were dressed in their best, and unfortunately, being not Muslim, I was not allowed to attend. But they returned, and we had a nice breakfast, and the day continued as usual. Next slide, please. Thank you.
So my host dad was like the designated butcher for our extended family for the slaughter of the sheep, because all of us in Morocco, actually, our families slaughtered sheep. And so we had 6 sheep because we were quite a large family with cousins and everything. And everyone kept busy, like an uncle recited the prayers. Sorry, this is a little graphic, but several people held the sheep down. And my job personally was to sweep up the blood. And although it may seem a little gruesome, the slaughter felt very special because it was a really direct and beautiful picture of sacrifice and charity, which is what Eid al-Adha was all about. And so it was a very cool experience.
For me, my host family, we had 2 sheep stored at our grandma's house. I know I had like some classmates whose sheep were like living with them, like in their yards or something. But for like us personally, it was at our grandma's house. So we woke up a little early, like around 8, 9 a.m. and we went over there. And then when we arrived, I had like host younger siblings and cousins, like around the age of 9, and they were like playing around with the sheep. It was really interesting to see how they were interacting with them. And then around like noon, a hired professional came and killed the sheep. And while they did, like everyone in the family kind of like gathered around in a circle around the courthouse and watched. It was something very sacred, and it was really cool to see the whole process of everything. And you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, so sorry for any additional noise, but I lived in an apartment building in Rabat, and all of the residents of the building were able to come together on the roof. We had about 5 or 6 sheep, and it was kind of like a fun cookout environment with all of the families. And yeah, that was my experience with the slaughter.
So my experience with the slaughter was after our whole prayer, we ended up driving around to see if there was a local slaughter. I noticed it was very like community oriented, and I really enjoyed that. Everyone sort of shared each piece of the meat for dinner that day and had it for the rest of the day.
So for me, we had lamb couscous for dinner, and couscous is actually a very common dish in Moroccan culture. We ate it when I was on program every Friday for lunch at school, and usually it's a custom with like a yogurt-based drink. It's very nice, and just in general, it's not really atypical to eat lamb for many days and meals after Eid because they really don't waste like any part of the lamb, and so they use it on almost like every dish after.
Sorry for the noise in the back, but my family meal was I had lele goreng, which is fried catfish, and then each meal was served with white rice. And then after that, there was beef, and my family was from Sumatra, which is a region in Indonesia. So I got to experience a lot of those foods.
So in our family, the lamb, none of it was wasted. So we ate like the liver, the fat, the head, the stomach, the intestines, the meat. And in the picture on the left, you can notice we had brain, which we ate for breakfast. And it tasted very similar to scrambled eggs to me. And it was served with mint tea. And then on the right, you can see a little barbecue that we had on our roof. We called it the steh. And so my host cousins and I would go up there and we would barbecue some of the meat in many of the days following Eid. And then we would sleep under the stars. It was really beautiful. And so that was another cool food experience that we had. And also in relation to meal times, I found the meal times that we had during Eid were a great like gauge of my language ability because NSLI-Y is primarily a language learning program. And so it was cool to notice that, at the beginning of the program, when I was sitting at the table with like my host family, I couldn't really understand a lot of what they were saying. But by the time Eid came about halfway through the program, I started to have a better grasp on the conversation topics. And so that just shows that, meal times are a really important opportunity for your language skills when abroad on NSLI-Y. Next slide, please.
And I mean, I absolutely agree with Liam. I definitely learned a lot of new vocabulary on Eid, and it was really special to come together as a family and sit and practice my Moroccan Arabic. But in terms of the meal, we had a very traditional Moroccan Eid meal. We had the sheep liver kebab for lunch with mint tea and bread and assorted vegetables, as always. And then for dinner, we had the sheep intestine wrapped in fat, which is pretty traditional, as well as couscous, mint tea. It was very delicious.
And so my day, like I said before, I woke up around 6 a.m. and went to my grandma's house. When we got there, like almost all of our extended family was there. So like this was when I was really meeting a lot of them for the first time. And it was really cool because like even though there was definitely a language barrier, they were very like opening and greetful when like we walked in. They were very warm. And so there were two lamb and the host siblings were playing around with the sheep and like like I like came in, like we like played, and then the professional came to slaughter. And then while it was happening, my host family was actually very understanding about the situation, and they knew that since we were like foreigners, they told us that like if we were uncomfortable with watching the lamb die or like seeing the blood or anything, that we could just like step outside of the room and not watch, which was very nice to be offered that. And then afterwards we all sat around and helped prepare food. Our host mom actually taught us how to clean the stomach, which is in the picture below. It was definitely a very interesting experience.
Similarly, my family woke up early. We woke up at 7. We did the community prayer, and then we ended up driving around to see the slaughter. We took a lot of pictures that day. My host mom really enjoys taking pictures. So the picture on the right bottom was my host cousin, me, and then my 3 host siblings. We got along very well. I remember that day when we went back home, we broke our fast, and then we ended up playing cards and helping my host mom clean the dishes. So they had these really nice porcelain dishes that they would put the side dishes in. So we ended up cleaning them out of their hiding, and it was a really great way to bond with each other because I got there, I think, around 5 days before too. So they made me feel like family.
Yeah, so my day, as I mentioned earlier, we woke up early, and then after breakfast, I helped my family and the residents of my apartment building carry all the sheep upstairs. They wouldn't fit in the elevator. It was a pretty small elevator, but that was a fun experience. Um, and I really felt like I was becoming a part of the family. You know, they entrusted me enough to help them with that. And then we watched the slaughter, cleaned up. I helped prepare lunch. And as is common in Morocco, my family took a siesta, which is an afternoon nap. And it was just a day of relaxation and, you know, watching TV, which is also pretty common, and spending time with the family. And in the evening, I accompanied my dad and uncle to the butcher. So we didn't actually butcher the meat ourselves, but we took a couple of our neighbors' meat as well. And they had a small child, one of the families in particular. So I helped them carry their meat up the stairs and help get it prepared. And then finally, to top the day off, it was a beautiful sunset in Rabat, and I went on a walk with my brother. Yeah.
Lud is an Amazigh Eid tradition, and it was a super unique opportunity that I got to witness. So basically, it takes place in the days following Eid al-Adha, and people will dress up as sheep and wear like the sheep pelts and masks and parade around, dancing and playing games. And you know, children would chase after them, and it was a really fun, like carnival-like festive atmosphere. And I think Bouj is just an example of like the diversity of experiences that you will have on the NSLI program, because it's a tradition that's unique to the indigenous people of Morocco. And so not everyone, so like in Indonesia, for example, there might be different experiences in relation to that. But so my advice for future NSLI-Y students would just be to embrace like whatever unique aspects of your experience abroad that you have. Like not everyone is going to have the same experience, and that's awesome. So yeah, Bouj was very cool. And I think that is it with our presentation. Thank you everyone for listening, and let us know if you have any questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
And once again, thank you to Ainaz, Italia, Liam, and Rowan. Next up, we'll have Othman, a NSLI alumnus from Morocco's 2018-2019 academic year program, to discuss his experience with Friday prayer and the month of Ramadan in Morocco.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to share with you guys today. So first of all, I would like to give some religious and cultural background. So Morocco is a Muslim country, as many of you may know, and most of its traditions come from Arab traditions and Islamic traditions, and their majority language is Arabic. So today, as has just been stated, I will cover two widely practiced traditions in Morocco, one of which occurs weekly, so it's very integrated into daily life, and then one of which is a large event that occurs yearly. So that is Friday prayer first, and then fasting and celebration during the month of Ramadan second. So first of all, we have Friday prayer and gathering. So Friday, as some of you may know, is the most important day of the week in Arab culture, and hence also in Moroccan culture. And the word Friday in Arabic is Yom el-Jum'ah, which is related by the root in to the words in Arabic for gathering and for meeting. So that's tajammu' and ijtima'. So they kind of, you can hear they kind of come from the same origin. And this is because Friday in Arabic is the day where everybody meets together. And Muslims in Morocco generally will have Friday as the first day of their weekend, and they will all gather together for that Friday prayer or a Salat al-Jum'ah at noon. And here's an example, a picture of the King of Morocco leading prayer, just kind of in the traditional Moroccan clothing. So this Friday prayer is generally preceded by a long sermon. These sermons were quite important for me because they gave me the chance to hear and learn a side of Arabic that I would never really have been able to hear in my day-to-day life in Morocco, which is the more religious side of the language. I found that quite interesting. However, unfortunately, most non-Muslims, as has been stated in the previous presentations, are not allowed to enter most mosques in Morocco. So this is not an experience that I was lucky to have, but most of my classmates were unfortunately not able to have. However, Morocco is a great country. I highly recommend it. And anybody who is curious about religion or just learning in general, Moroccans are very, very happy to share more about their culture with other people and to help people understand their religion, their beliefs, everything that you might want to know. And Friday also gives the really interesting opportunity, as you were able to see in the previous slide, to see Moroccans wear their more traditional clothes. So that's called the jalaba for men and kaftan for women. So here's in this slide, you have an example of another typical Friday prayer in Morocco in the masjid, which is their name for mosque. And then you have the man standing in the middle giving his Friday sermon with everybody watching on and listening. I would say my favorite part of Friday overall, though, is the Friday couscous. So in the spirit of gathering and celebration, essentially every household in all of Morocco prepares couscous for lunch after the Friday prayer. And this tradition is actually so important that some restaurants will exclusively serve couscous on Fridays. This is, again, an opportunity for families to reconnect with each other after the week is over. And couscous was personally my favorite dish in Morocco. So here's a picture of couscous from my NSLI-Y program. And you might be asking, what is couscous? What is couscous made of? So couscous is essentially a large dish that is eaten from a shared plate, typically prepared with, again, couscous, as you may guess, which is a type of grain similar, of course, rice or wheat. I would say it's closer to wheat than rice, but it has its own unique flavor, texture. And it is served over a kind of stew of a mix of eggplant, zucchini, carrots, parsnips, pumpkin, tomato, and a bit of cabbage, usually with some chicken added on into that. And that stew is poured over the grain, and then usually you have like a garnish of onions and raisins. It's really quite delicious, and it basically has all the nutrition that you could need in your day. So, and moving on to now the once per year tradition that I mentioned in the introduction. So we have Ramadan, which is quite famous. You maybe will know a little bit about it. So Ramadan is the month of fasting in the Muslim world. So it is a time to focus on one's dedication to God. And in this time, you abstain from food during the day, from sunrise to sunset, as well as any bad habits that one might have. This includes, like, for example, smoking, cursing. Even you're not supposed to think badly, like about other people. Like you're supposed to try to have kind thoughts to other people. And you also add a sixth prayer at nighttime. Whereas usually you have only 5 prayers during the day. So during this time, Moroccans will focus much more on prayer and on community. So they will also wear traditional clothes more often, and will enjoy breaking fast together at sunset. And they tend to have particular foods that they enjoy breaking their fasts with, which are incredibly delicious. So you can see a couple examples. You have Moroccan tea, you have masimman, you have khalif, you have all kinds of different sweets. All these are quite good. A lot of them are, most of them, I think every single one of them are unique to Morocco. And it was really very, very, very great food, in my opinion. And my personal experience of Ramadan in Morocco. So I really very much enjoyed Ramadan in Morocco because I could feel the community spirit with everyone united together and shared difficulty. And then everybody was also united by the shared celebrations once fasting was over. And fasting, of course, is not easy, but there's no need to worry because a lot of non-Muslims were free to try it out of curiosity. And then if in private they wanted to break it, have a snack or something, even go to McDonald's and have like a cheeseburger, they were free to do that. And here you can see a picture of one of my classmates on the bottom, or I guess left, but on the bottom in this case, since it's rotated. our Moroccan friend in the middle, and me one of the evenings of Ramadan. And the two of us, as you can see, maybe part of the photo, were wearing the traditional jalaba. And then on the left of my slide, you can see some traditional sweets for breaking fast in the middle, as well as on the side, you can see some dishes. I believe it was kind of like a meatball dish, and it was actually quite good, I remember. And that was for breaking fast. Thank you all for listening. And written here in Arabic is shukran wa marhaban bikum fil Maghrib. So thank you, and hopefully welcome one day to Morocco, and you can experience all these wonderful things I just told you about. Thank you.
Thank you, Uthman. And thank you for joining us all the way in the early morning in Taipei. Next up, we will have Korean Academic Year 2019-2020 alum Poppy to discuss the holidays that he celebrated in Korea.
Hello, my name is Poppy Prieto, and like Kyle said, I participated in the 2019-2020 Korean Academic Year, and I'm going to be talking about some of the holidays I celebrated. Next slide, please. The holiday I'm going to be focusing on most is kind of a little hybrid one of Friendsgiving. It was celebrated on US Thanksgiving Day while I was in Korea, and it was just a cultural exchange to its fullest. We participated in our little cultural exchange with Access Program members who were originally from North Korea. They had immigrated to China and then from China into South Korea, and they were using the Access Program to learn English. So it was the NSLI cohort, Access Program members, as well as university mentors. At the time, my cohort was doing our winter cultural program, our winter cultural project, and we had local Korean university students act as our mentors during it. So in that big photo of everyone in there, that's all the people you'll see. There was a lot of traditional Korean clothing. The girls in the front of the photo, they're wearing hanbok, or just traditional dress. And all of the NSLI kids, we had our little jackets and we were, representing. Next slide, please. So at our cultural exchange, we did have a lot of activity-based things to get to know each other. Each NSLI kid was paired up with an Access Program member, as well as mentors just kind of thrown about to keep the language flowing. We did a lot of partner activities and intros, just your basic icebreakers of getting to know each other. We had little sheets with questions printed out to ask each other. And it was really a cultural exchange to its fullest. The Access members spoke Korean, but it was different enough from the Korean we as NSLI students were actively learning. And the majority of them spoke Mandarin from their time living in China before they immigrated to South Korea. So there was a lot of Korean, English, Mandarin, and miming gestures, things like that to try and understand each other. And that was one of my favorite things. My cohort also gave a little presentation, as you can see in the picture down there, where we just talked about how thankful we were in that moment and just how thankful we were for our new friends. Next slide, please. And so here's some more pictures of our food. Like I said, cultural exchange. There was a lot of different types of food going on one plate. We had traditional American Thanksgiving food. So you'll see some like pumpkin pie and like bread rolls and stuff. We had a lot of traditional Korean foods, and then some traditional North Korean cuisine, which is very similar to current day South Korean foods, just with a little bit more limited ingredients and stuff. And while we were sharing our food, we were just getting to know our partners even more. During this time, I did make really close friends with a lot of the people you'll see in the background of the photos on this slide, as well as the people all displayed in the last photo. Yeah, this was my most memorable holiday, as I was able to connect with people using my Korean that I was actively learning. I'm still very, very proud of myself for our Friendsgiving celebration. I got to know someone, I got to know about their life and their story, all while using my target language living in my host country. We were connecting about like homesickness as well, things like that. So that's a very, very memorable time as we were sharing our food, having those talks. Next slide, please. And for the other holidays, outside of Friendsgiving, we did celebrate Korean Thanksgiving or Chuseok. I don't really have any photos of that. It was a very big family-oriented celebration. And my host family, we didn't really take a whole lot of photos. We did a lot of cooking, a lot of present exchange, things like that. I did celebrate Christmas and Valentine's Day and Halloween, and some Korean holidays like Hangul Day or Alphabet Day, Children's Day, things like that. And overall, it was I would say holidays were a lot different than they were in America. Things were decorated a lot more. Everything felt a lot more festive, which I really enjoyed. In that photo, you can see the Han River, which kind of cuts through Seoul. It's completely decorated. The parts that you can walk through in the city, they had lights strung up everywhere during the winter season, not even just around Christmas. It was just the whole time. And so culturally, that was a big change for me to see, of coming from different US cities and not seeing the level of like festivities around. In the picture with all the bread and the lattes and stuff, that was from Valentine's Day, which was my second favorite holiday. In Korea, it was seen more as like a couple's day, which Christmas was considered a couple's day as well. But there was a big push on Valentine's Day of self-love. And so we got out of class a little bit early and we were able to just go have a day for ourselves. Our instructors let us take the time to love ourselves. And so me and some of my friends just booked it to a cafe, got an ungodly amount of sweets, just sat there, ate, drank, had the time of our life. But yeah, those were the holidays that I celebrated. I also celebrated my birthday. So in the top photo, you can see me and my lovely host parents. They got me a cake, surprised me. Culturally, that was, very similar to America, how you would celebrate your birthday with your family. But a big difference in celebrating my birthday was at my host school. My classmates surprised me. I had to do pretty much like a little questionnaire of my favorite things, my favorite color, favorite candies, stuff like that. And then when the day of my birthday came, I got to school and my desk was just decorated, which culturally was a very new thing for me, but very, very memorable. Next slide, please. So those were all of my cultural moments while celebrating holidays in Korea. If y'all have any other questions about other Korean holidays or anything like that today, I would love to answer them. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Poppy. Next and last up, we have Takeda, who's going to talk about the holidays they celebrated in Taiwan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Takeda. I was a part of the Chinese academic year 2021 to 2022 in Taiwan. I was talking about celebrating Lunar New Year's and Children's Day. So my program actually started a little bit later than intended. We got to Taiwan around late December, so I actually missed the beginning holidays from autumn and summer, but luckily I got to celebrate Lunar New Year's and Children's Day. Next slide, please. So I celebrated these holidays with my host family and my NSLI friends' host family. So my host family, we celebrated Lunar New Year's together, which is normally Singin. And our Lunar New Year fell on February 1st. So I was already with the host family about a month into this holiday. And that holiday basically just celebrates the arrival of spring or the arrival of a new beginning on the lunar solar calendar. And with my friend's host family, we celebrated Children's Day, which was on April 4th. And that holiday basically just honors children and their welfare and how children are doing throughout the year. Next slide, please. So for Children's Day, our host, Freya's host family, which is another New Zealand, her host family took us down to Kunding, and then later we took a ferry to Salocho, which is a little island off the south of Taiwan. And on this trip, we basically just got to distress and to decompress and not worry about coursework or doing like actual paperwork. We were just there to have fun and to build connections. When we got to Kunding, we went on a nice hiking trail. We got to go to like a really big forest in Kunding. It was really nice. And then later at the night, we got to go to a really nice popular night market in Kunding. It was nice. We got to walk around with the kids, and we got to buy them gifts that they can remember us by. And they brought us gifts that we could remember of that island. And it was really just a nice night to celebrate with each other and just praise each other for all that we've done in the year. I felt that trip in particular really helped build a strong connection with the host family and also with my friends. Ray and Freya, they kind of became my best friends, and I still talk to them today. And that trip, it was basically just helping us understand each other, and it was nice to just not worry about school. And even though we weren't really studying, my Mandarin was also just heavily improving because I was around the kids. So with the kids, it was like we were learning new vocabulary every day because they're kids, they just talk. And so we were just listening and just enjoying each other and learning things in the car and on the walks. And it was really nice to just not worry about being shoved face first into a textbook, but rather just like living with people there. Next slide, please. And then for Lunar New Year, I got to celebrate it for a weekend. And I was really surprised because an alum from from past years was still in Taiwan and still in contact with our host family. So Chance is from the 2018 and 2019 cohort, and we shared the same host family. So I remember when I first got to Taiwan, my host mom, she shared his line with me, and we got to talk about what I should expect from the host family and what my first couple of months will look like in Taiwan. And I think that really helped me understand like what my situation was going to be in the coming months. And it really helped me come to terms with my experience. So the night before Lunar New Year's, Chance came down to Kaohsiung, and me and him went to go meet our ama, which is the maternal grandmother in Taiwanese. And that experience was really weird for me because the whole family didn't come with us. It was just me and Chance and our ama and a couple of uncles. So I was like, she doesn't even know me. We haven't met. What am I going to do? But it was like I had nothing to be worried about. It was like meeting a grandma from here. Like it felt like she was my actual grandma. She came in, did the normal grandma spiel where, oh, you're so small, come eat. And she prepared me bread pouch, which is basically elders in the family. They will give the younger children money or like gifts to celebrate and bring about the new year. And she had one that had my name on it. I was like, how do you know that? It was just, I felt so welcomed. I forgot all about the homesickness that I was feeling. I just felt like I was at home and I was with my grandma and with my stepbrother. And it was just nice to have fun and connect with them. And then we drove down to Tainan. And in Tainan, we went to see museum visits. And we did full cultural exchange. So on that night, my whole family and we went to a Hispanic restaurant, and I got to show them a lot of the Hispanic foods that I ate like at home. And then later on in the day, we had a Taiwanese feast. Altogether, we ate Taiwanese foods. So I got to show them a bit of my culture, and they got to show me theirs. And that really helped open up the borders of, that awkwardness and that homesickness and feeling like we're strangers. It was like we got to bond over something that we could relate to, which was food. And I think that came up a lot in the past presentation. So that's something that will really pop up in your experiences, just food and connecting through ways that you can connect to. Next slide. That's all I have for today. Thank you for listening. Any questions or anything, just message me on my Instagram. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Takita. And thank you again to all of our panelists. Before we open the floor for questions, I'm just going to ask like one or two, and then everyone else will get their turn. First off, just in general, how did celebrating these holidays abroad help you really develop or cement your language skills? I know some of you touched on it in your presentations, but I'd love to hear if there are any other examples.
I kind of feel like Liam touched on it really well of how important food is with language. And I feel like all of the holidays that I celebrated in Korea, I was able to connect over food a little bit more than I was on just regular meals that I would have with my host family, just because, a celebration of a holiday, there's so much more history that's going into it. And so you were able to learn new vocabulary through any celebration of a holiday and the foods that you're eating and things like that. For my cohort specifically, all of the Korean holidays that we celebrated, like Chuseok and like Hongul Day, things like that, and even Children's Day, we would have like a little class lesson about it. My teacher would go over like a brief explanation of like, this is the holiday, this is its origin, everything like that. And that really was a big force that cemented the language learning process of like, I'm getting all of this new vocabulary related to the holiday. And we were given a lot of resources to learn more about whatever holiday we had just celebrated as well.
Thank you. And then to any of our panelists, I'm really curious, what is one thing that you learned about yourself by celebrating a new holiday or participating in a cultural tradition that's different from one that you grew up with?
I'll answer. So my family, when we celebrate holidays, we come together for like the basics like Christmas, New Year's. But I learned that my culture is not really inherently based in like family. Like I was not used to eating at a really big dinner table with like other family members. I'm used to kind of just taking my food to my room or like eating with like certain family members. So having that like kind of family structured, like we eat dinner together, like you cannot leave, you sit here and eat. That made me like want to appreciate my family a little bit more. Like it's the little moments that count, like just sharing a meal together or watching TV together or eating fruit together. Little things like that, like they make you like appreciate your experiences just a little bit more. And so when I came home, like I found myself like asking my little sister to come watch a TV show with me, or I was like asking my family to all sit down at the table to eat dinner. And I think if I hadn't come to Taiwan, I would not have done that. Like I would have been like continuing to just do those things like normally.
And for me, I felt like Eid al-Adha was a really cool opportunity to like just like reflect on like the similarities and like differences and like in different identities and different experiences that people have had. Like for example, as I mentioned earlier, Eid al-Adha commemorates when the Prophet Ibrahim took his son Ismail to like be sacrificed, and that's like story is also in like the Judeo-Christian tradition that I'm used to back home, like with Abraham and his son. And so it was unique to like discuss that. It was cool to discuss that with my host family and have a dialogue about that. And I think that's just one example of like the opportunities that the NSLI program has for you to just like have dialogues about different things and to learn about the similarities that unite us and also the differences that make us, you know, unique and cool. So yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. This question is actually specifically for our Eid al-Adha student presentation group, just because you were working together on this and most of you celebrated it in Morocco, but Italia also celebrated it in Indonesia on literally the other side of the Islamic world. What were some of those like cool things that you learned about each other's traditional experiences, and how your host culture like impacted and made some like very unique differences?
Can I answer this one? So I noticed that it was very different that in my host community, it was very community based, and they shared everything, and everything was sort of done together, and everybody helped one another and gave each other like the leg up. So like, for example, with the slaughter, everyone shared the meat, and it was different because they had big animals, like big cows, and everyone got a piece of share. So it was really great to see how other families were sort of like private with it, and others were, you know, sharing it with others.
I mean, I think I can add on to that a little bit. In Morocco, it was also very community based, but more so within the families. And oftentimes that meant having the entire extended family at your house celebrating with you. And especially for someone who had only lived there for 2 or 3 weeks, it was a little overwhelming at first, but I got to practice a lot of Arabic, and people had lots of questions for me. And like Liam said, it was a time for a lot of dialogue. And I think that's how you learn about other cultures. And just how people lead their lives in different places is just through talking with them. And it was really special to see everyone kind of get excited, like at school, everyone was talking about the sheep, and, our families were all talking about the sheep. My brother was hyping up the sheep. And there's a whole dealing with, my dad had to go get the sheep, bring the sheep. It was like, it was exciting and it was fun, and it was building up this kind of, community feeling. Yeah.
For me, it was very nice to see, and like celebrating Eid with my host family really made me realize like how much I enjoy like a familial connection. Like even though like Rowan said, like we were only there for a couple weeks and everything was very overwhelming at first, especially because I came there like as a beginner. Like there was like a very prominent language barrier. It was like when Eid happened, like I literally felt like I was like my host cousins. Like I felt like I was a cousin. Like I felt like I was the granddaughter or like the daughter to my host family. And it was really nice because it was like, even though like we couldn't really talk, like there was always like kind of like this charades game when I was like communicating with my host family. So when they were like, oh, like, like the sheep's gonna die, like they would make like motions and everything. And it was like, even though it was like in Western culture, it would be like a little more scarier. It was really nice to see it from like a different perspective and like the positive side that they saw to that. And I would say that it was really interesting to see the Amazigh culture. Like Liam was talking about how in Marrakesh, like they saw like Amazigh culture and how they would like wear masks and everything. Like when I was celebrating it, I really didn't come across that like in Rabat. I mean, we definitely did come across like Amazigh culture in other ways, but it was interesting to see how they celebrated Eid through collaboration.
All right. Thank you. We do have a couple of questions from our attendees. First, I do see a question from Poppy, or for Poppy, asking if you're still in touch with any of the colleagues from that you made and connected with in that event, be they North or South Korean people.
Yeah, I do still keep in contact with a few of the people that I met during our Friendsgiving celebration. The majority of I only keep in touch with a handful of the people that I was grouped with because, we got closest through our little activities. But yeah, it's just little Instagram messages and stuff. Like I'll reply to their stories and we, comment on each other's things, friends like that. And then every few months or so, we'll have a conversation of like, hey, how are you doing in school? How's this going? Like, how's life? And just a little catch up like that. So yeah, I was able to make connections through that little celebration that I still have today. They're friends that I talk to quite often.
Okay. And then I have a question. I have several questions, but the next one that I'm going to ask is for some of the holidays that are more centered around like food and communal eating, if anyone had dietary restrictions, how did you work around that?
So I'm allergic to seafood, and living on an island, that's all we really ate sometimes. So the nights that my host mom would cook seafood or fish, she would immediately tell me, she was like, hey, either you gotta find something to eat or I'll make you some beef, like just let me know. So it's more like mostly just communication, like just letting them know. And when it came to like the bigger feast, like I sat at a different side of the table, so they would move the seafood to a lower part of the table and I would sit somewhere else where I was just away from it just for precaution. There was one time where I did have a scare, but luckily I have a medicine, so I was fine. But like sometimes you just forget, like it's just a part of the dish, and like she didn't think about it, so like it was like little shrimps and like very tiny shrimps and the rice, and I was eating it, it was really good. But then I noticed that I was starting to swell. But we acted quickly. We made sure she already had files of like all my medicine and stuff, so she knew like what to do if it ever happened. So like just communication and making sure that you have everything present in case something happens.
I did not have a dietary restriction during the program, but several of my classmates were vegetarian, and they actually had a bit of an interesting learning experience. So At our language school, the food was provided by the Amal Institute, which provides job education for women who are deaf. And so a lot of my classmates that were vegetarian, they learned how to like, say I'm vegetarian in Morocco, or how to sign I'm vegetarian in Moroccan Sign Language. And so that was like a fun little experience that I remember.
Yeah, and while I was in Korea, I also have a lot of dietary restrictions and intolerances and stuff like that. And it was kind of already touched on of just the communication that you have to have with like your cohort as a group, your host family, your implementing organization. And for myself, I just had to carry medication with me pretty much all of the time. And it was just being aware. There was a big learning curve of being able to read ingredient labels in Korean and not know these like words that I don't even know in English on ingredient labels. And so that was a little bit of an adjustment, but it was an entirely doable thing of learning how to avoid the foods that you are allergic to or like you'll have a reaction to and things like that. But very similar to what Liam said, we had a lot of students on my cohort as well who had other dietary restrictions, and they had to figure out very, very quick how to say, I can't have insert food, but it is a very doable thing, even if you do have some foods that you can't eat.
Thank you all so much. I've got a couple of questions that have come in that are kind of similarly related. So I'm just going to ask this one to all of our attendees. And it involves more of the cultural exchange of maybe traditional holidays in the United States. Was there anything that you might have brought from the United States to share with your host family during traditional American holidays? And did you celebrate your own traditional American holidays in your own way abroad with your host family?
I can start us off on this one. So I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I brought my host family some gifts. And although it's not a nationally recognized holiday, a lot of Pittsburghers consider Steelers games to be pretty far up there. So I brought them a terrible towel. I'm not a huge football fan myself, but it's a pretty good representation of Pittsburgh. And needless to say, they were a little confused, and my language abilities were a little lacking to explain what it was used for. But eventually I got to be able to explain that people just stand there and wave it around like that. And they put it on their coffee table and like spread it out as like a placemat. And so it was, although it wasn't like a true holiday, it was a little piece of who I am, and they were really excited to learn all about it. So
My cohort had a 4th of July pool party, which was because 4th of July occurred during the time that we were there. So that was fun. We like all the host siblings were invited. And so we kind of got to share that piece of American culture. And also, I'd encourage you to like, try to relate other things in relation to your home back in the US. Like, for example, I attempted to make chocolate chip cookies for my host family. They did not turn out well, but it was still a fun experience. So yeah.
We didn't necessarily celebrate this, but my dad's a veteran, and so on Veterans Day, I called him, and the whole family came around. We just talked to him, and that was really nice to just like share that part of family with my host family. And I got pretty close too. Like, I don't know how, because like he didn't speak Mandarin, but I did best to translate, and they were like, he's amazing, he's a good man. I was like, okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you as well to Kita, because that also segues very well into another question. And that was kind of like, what's it like to celebrate holidays or birthdays away from home and without your family and friends from the United States? Like, what were some of the major differences, and how did you adjust to some of these first holidays away from home?
I feel like
sorry.
a lot of the holidays, it did get a little more difficult around holiday seasons with like homesickness and missing family and things like that. But for me and for a lot of people in my cohort, it was an easier thing to get through of just talking and connecting with your family in America just ever so often. If you're talking with them too much, you are focusing on the fact that you're away and you're doing this and the holidays are happening and you're not with your family. So for me personally and the people who I was really close with on my cohort, and we had like talked through our homesickness struggles specifically on holidays and birthdays, it was just trying to plan out time to talk with your family in America. So there was a lot of people be like, no, I can't go out and study this day. I can't go do this thing. I'm going to have like a fake little holiday celebration on Zoom with my family in America. So things like that were really good to connect and, you know, feel like you were at home in your host country. For me personally, I sent my family like a big holiday box of things that I had collected on holidays that I had been through. So I got them little traditional Korean knickknacks from like Korean Thanksgiving and just little holidays like that. And I also brought my younger brothers like Christmas gifts and mailed them to them. So there are ways that you can connect with your family while you are abroad, specifically around holidays when it gets a little tougher. It's mainly just trying to find the time or make the time to give yourself an outlet to connect with your family in America.
I spent my birthday in quarantine. So my birthday was on the 23rd of December. And so we spent, my birthday was in quarantine, Christmas was in quarantine, and then New Year was in quarantine. So I know like a lot of my cohort members, they called like family back home because we were in quarantine, so there wasn't much that we could do other than do Zooms. So that's kind of how we spent the holidays. I know a lot of my cohort members said that they felt like it wasn't really like Christmas because there was no snow. There was like no indication outside that it was going to be Christmas. So a lot of people just called back home. For me, spending my birthday in quarantine, it was better than I expected. My host family, they actually sent all my cohort members like tea, and then they sent me a nice little birthday gift and cake. And so I got to like go on Zoom with them and like, you know, eat the cake and say thank you. And so like they'll make it happen. It happens.
Thank you so much. We've gotten a couple of questions related to this as well, so I'm going to kind of gather them together and ask as well. For anyone who feels comfortable answering, if you either consider yourself to be pretty openly or devoutly religious, or you are participating in a cultural event in a host country or in a host location where the event was based around a religion that is not your own, how did that fit into your exchange and what did you learn about it or learn from it?
So I'm Christian, and the predominant religion in Morocco is Islam. And so yeah, Islam definitely, permeates a lot of aspects of Moroccan culture, like with Eid al-Adha, which is, an Islamic holiday. And so I think that I think my other cohort members could agree that it's really just a question of like what you're comfortable with as well as what the host community is comfortable with. For example, like Uthman said, like non-Muslims are not allowed in most mosques in Morocco. So that was something that was like, I made sure to respect. But then also like my host family was very open and free to talk to me about, differences in religion and like what they believe and what I believe. So that's just something you can, figure out as you communicate with your friends and family in the country. And also the NSLI-Y program did a great job of exposing us to like the diversity of religious experiences in Morocco. Like, for example, we visited synagogues in Morocco and learned about Moroccan Jewish culture. And some of my classmates visited several different churches while we were there. So there's definitely so I would encourage you to make sure to like do your research on like what you're comfortable with and what your community is comfortable with, but there's a lot of opportunities for different religious expressions on while you're abroad.
Similarly, I myself am not very religious. I did grow up religious, but now I just, don't go to church as much. And I did grow up Christian. My host family, they were Buddhist, and it was very different than any of the religion I had experienced in my life. And I had expressed with them in my implementing organization and everything before I went to Korea that I wasn't particularly religious, but I was open to seeing how my host family, practiced. And so I would go with them sometimes to their meetings and go to church with them and everything like that. But it was a very clear and open communication of what I was personally comfortable with. I did have a lot of talks with my host family of planning out days that I could go. They were also they made sure to make sure I was the most comfortable that I could be with religion, as that can, be a big thing for anyone in their life if they do practice or if they don't. And so there was just a lot of using my best language to talk about it the best that I could. But through going to the Buddhist church with them, I did learn a lot of Buddhist specific language through, just being in that experience. And it was from a language standpoint, it was very, very, very informative for me. But yeah, there was just a lot of communication. So in that sense, if you are devoutly religious or if you are not practicing anything like that, I would just, like Liam said, just try and communicate the best that you can.
Thank you. Staying kind of in the realm of host family, and when it comes to holidays and cultural exchange, a lot of you mentioned food as kind of the avenue of that. One attendee is asking, like, food was mentioned a lot. One, was that the main thing? And then were there other ways that you like engage with your host family, engaged in cultural exchange, either through the holidays or outside of the holidays, that didn't pertain to food?
Yeah, so I actually had a little cousin in my household. He was about 10. So in school, he was learning modern standard Arabic, which is also what I was doing in school. Although I was probably learning at like an 8-year-old level, maybe a little more. So he was actually able to help me with my homework. And it was special. I got to bond with him, and my host parents saw that, and they would sometimes sit down and help out. And so connecting through schoolwork, he also loved Rubik's Cubes and Pokemon. And so I got to connect with him over that. He loved Monopoly a lot. So my roommates and I played Monopoly with him. But, in terms of the older members of the family, with a brother that was about my age, we just, spent a lot of time with each other. And it kind of just, a relationship developed naturally. And especially, when you don't have, when you have that language barrier at first, you kind of get to know the person really well, through a lot of charades and body language. Yeah. But as soon as you start to develop your skills some more, then it kind of becomes complete, and it's really fulfilling. And for the adults, I tried communicating about my day and my friends and my life back home, and they were really interested in my story, and I was really interested in theirs. And that kind of common, goal to learn about each other brought us closer together. And I know we said no food, but cooking was a really big one as well. So
I'm gonna piggyback back off of that and say that board games was like a very important thing too. I brought like the Zig cards. It was really cool. I ended up teaching them how to play Speed, card game. I really love that card game. So we ended up playing like almost every night for like a good 2 months. That was really cool. I had a little host sister, and it got to the point where, she was like, "Oh, can I sleep with you? Let's have a slumber party." I was like, "Oh, yeah, like no problem. It's really cool." So for the remainder, we ended up like having slumber parties every night. It was really cool.
Yeah, I also played cards a lot with my host family. I brought Uno, but I did not remember the rules, so I made up my own rules. And so that kind of was an interesting experience when my host siblings and I got together with other exchange students and played Uno. and we were operating on a different set of rules than everyone else, thanks to me. And then they also showed me how to play a Moroccan card game. And then something else that's a little unrelated is, but I wanted to note that lots of host families members do speak English. Like for my experience in my implementing program in Morocco, every one of us had at least one member of our host family that did speak English. So if anyone's nervous about that, like the language barrier, there's a good chance that, you might be paired with English speakers.
Another thing similar to board games, I also played board games, so that's just a universal, you get close with your family playing games. But me and my host brother, we got really close just watching movies. We were both really big James Bond fans, and so we made it like our own personal goal to watch as many of the James Bond movies as we could, starting like way back with the first ones. And so we would just put on a movie, and it was really good for like language learning through Korean subtitles like that. But that's some of my most favorite memories, are just sitting there connecting with my host brother. We would just tell silly little stories and make jokes, and I would learn like slang words and stuff from the subtitles that I didn't necessarily understand. So I would say movies and media are pretty big of connecting with your host family more. If you're a sports person, I really like hockey and baseball, and I kind of forced my host family to watch like, hey, this is what I like, look at it. And they became big baseball fans themselves. So there's pretty much any of your interest, you can not necessarily force, but influence your host family of trying to like it too. And that's a good way to connect with them.
Definitely the media. Like my host brother, he was super busy with exams at the time, but when he wasn't busy, we would always listen to music because we were both like band members. So he was playing his guitar, I would play my bass, and we kind of just connected more on music. And we would like listen to music in the car rides, and like he'd tease me and stuff. Like you just get closer over time, like as you continue on like with the relationship.
And oh, sorry, I don't know if we have time, but if I could jump in really quickly, one thing that I think I was also really lucky to experience, and quite a few other people that were in my cohort were lucky enough to experience, was that my host family actually traveled with me a couple times. So they had some family in another city in Morocco, that like a small countryside town, and this allowed me to not only see another side of Moroccan life, outside of the capital city, but also to really feel like I was kind of integrating into the family, and like they were really accepting me as like one of their own. And I kind of got to, this was touched on in other presentations too, but I would like to, emphasize that it was also important for me and quite a few other people, where we can really get to know everybody in the family, and it kind of, that did help me get like a lot closer with them too. So
Thank you. I have one more question from our attendees that I'd love to ask, and it's for anyone who feels comfortable answering. Were there any traditions during your experience that you didn't feel comfortable participating in? How did you react to that discomfort? What did you do? What did you learn from the moment, and how did you kind of work within and around it?
I kind of touched on it earlier. There weren't any real traditions, I would say, or like holiday related traditions that I was uncomfortable with my host family. So I don't know if I'll give the full answer that the person asking the question is looking for, but there were some slight cultural things that I just wasn't used to, and at first was a little uncomfortable with. But over time I got used to them. One of them was my host mom. She would serve everyone, and then there was like a specific order that we had to eat, and since I was like the youngest and seen as kind of like the newer guest, I had to eat first, and there was always like people refilling my plate as I was going. And so at first that was like a really, really overwhelming thing, and it made me very uncomfortable to have all of the attention on me while I was just trying to have my dinner. And so there was a little bit of discomfort from that, and it kind of persisted throughout my whole time there. But I just communication, like we've all touched on at different points throughout this event, was just the main thing. I talked with my host mom of like, hey, when we do this at meal times, it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And so there was kind of like dialing back of me having to eat first, but it was also me still being a part of the Korean cultural traditions that are just, in everyday society. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's specifically like related to traditions with holidays. I didn't necessarily experience any discomfort or anything like that around those, but I think it would just mainly be communication with your cohort, your implementing organization. And if it is like a much deeper thing, obviously connecting with someone at Iron would always be the best.
I would say, just to add on to that, this one's also not really a tradition, but in Morocco, in my experience, and many in my cohorts, are the host family moms, if they would take it upon themselves to clean your bedroom, if you didn't do that. And we were notified of this before the program, so I made sure to keep mine clean, so much so to the point that my RD visited and said that it looked like I didn't even live there. But in the few times that I left like a sock out or like a shoe in a certain place, I found it always corrected and in a different area. It was very nice and I appreciated it a lot. But that was something that, you have to be cognizant of, especially to not put too much work on your host family, and to make sure that they feel that that you're comfortable and you're living in a space where you want to live, and just something to be aware of, really.
Similar to that, my host family and a lot of people in my cohort had a very similar experience in Korea of our host moms just kind of cleaning, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we'll give you chores. You'll have something to do." But it was mainly just like host moms cleaning up everything, making your bed, taking your laundry, taking your trash out, stuff like that. But it was more of a, like Rohan said, more of a cultural adjustment than discomfort with tradition.
Right. Then I have one final question for all of our panelists. Some of you touched on it a little bit during your presentations, but I'm curious, what advice or recommendations do you have for future NSLI students, especially as it relates to maybe branching out of your comfort zone to immerse yourself in your host culture, or opening yourself up to new or different cultural traditions? And holidays are definitely something that can be very new and exciting.
If I could start out, the very first thing that came to mind, and the biggest thing that I realized after I left Morocco, was that I think that in my personal experience, unless you do a similar program again in the future, there's no other time where you will learn as much of your target language as quickly. And I think it's also easier to learn and retain new words. Like I think I remember the words that I learned in Morocco better than more easily than the words I might try to learn now, because you're just practicing so much, so your brain is really in that mode, right? So I would say to not be afraid to, of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't engage in the culture or make new experiences, but I would say that goes hand in hand, right? Like you by engaging as much as you can in the culture and trying to talk as much as you can with the people and learning as much as you can from them, I would say to definitely take as much of advantage of that as possible, because then when you're gone, you're not really going to have the same opportunities.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, like just savoring, your time on program in the country, because I know especially for the summer program, AY, I'm sure a little bit less, but it flew by. We got there and then pretty much we were leaving is what it felt like. And like Uthman said, like coming back, it's completely it's different, right? You learn language differently, and even like a week or 2 weeks after, you can you feel your skills start to need more practice to retain the same level. But just like enjoying it and savoring the little things, like walking around your neighborhood or your room, and going to shopping with your family. It's just like you're never really going to have that experience again. And it was really special.
I would also say, like, your experience is your own. So, like, don't try to make expectations for what you see from other, like, Nisliers or other people. I felt like when I came back, I was a little bit more like, oh, I wish I would have done that more. I wish I would have done this more. Like, I see what this person did. And it gets you nowhere. Like, your experience is your own, and how you went through that is how you go through it. So don't really necessarily worry about what other people are like doing on their program like too hard. Like, just focus on like your improvement and your like goals. Because like for me, like my hotel was like more like on the chiller side. So like they didn't treat me like special or like any like they didn't do anything like grand for me. I was just part of the family. Like I was just like the sister. And I'm like I see my peers, they were like going to like these different parts of the Kaohsiung or the different parts of Taiwan, and like I didn't really do that. And at first I was like, oh, I wonder why. Like, do they not want to take me anywhere? But then like after like talking with my host family, it was just like, no, like you're just like your family now. Like I'm not gonna treat you any different because you come from America. Like you are a part of the family. So like don't look at your experience and compare it to others. Like try and take it for what it is on its own.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists, all of our wonderful alumni who have joined us for this event. And thank you to everyone who participated, be it asking a question, listening in, calling in on the phone. We really appreciate it. That's all that we have for tonight. Again, thank you, everyone. I'm going to take one final minute to briefly kind of conclude the event and share some last minute NSLI resources. As we shared earlier in the event, for more information on the NSLI program, you're welcome to visit www.nsli4youth.org, and to read student and alumni stories about their own NSLI experiences in their own words. You're welcome to visit the NSLI Interactive website, which is also where you can find the recording of this event at NSLIY-interactive.org. And then also, before you go, it should pop up after I close the event, but in case it doesn't, we'd really appreciate it if you could take just a minute to fill out this post-event survey so we can continue to implement these great virtual events for everyone. Thank you all again so much. Once again, I cannot express enough thank you for our panelist speakers and for everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you. Good night. Good morning to Othman. And I hope you all have a happy holidays.